Doesn't it strike you when observing the sun and moon coursing through the sky that both appear as similar-sized orbs, tracing similarly related 24-hour paths overhead at similar speeds? Is this simply just coincidence? Well, modern astronomy would say, absolutely, no question about it. Despite the sun and moon appearing to be the same size, the sun is in fact 400 times larger and 400 times farther away. The sun is in fact the orbital center, with the very Earth we're standing on spinning around it. Now, during a solar eclipse, it is claimed that the moon is passing between the observer and the sun, thus blocking the light of the sun temporarily from the view of the observer. Okay, then what about lunar eclipses? Well, according to the authorities, as we've all been fed, lunar eclipses occur when the ball Earth moves between the sun and the moon, and we see the resulting shadow. But over 50 times in the last 500 years, none other than the Royal Astronomical Society of Britain has noted lunar eclipses which occurred when both the sun and moon were visible in the sky. Not to mention several of those times when the alleged ball Earth shadow has been seen on the wrong side of the lunar disk. Further, how is it possible that during a total lunar eclipse, the shadow starts off completely black as it creeps up on the moon, but when it fully covers the moon exhibits that signature reddish glow? My own research has led me to see that the authorities know about and are hiding information regarding a black sun, referred to in Vedic cosmology by the names Rahu and Ketu, classically described as orbs which eclipse both the sun and the moon in regular 18-year cycles. So investigate the subject for yourself and ask questions. On the ball Earth, there's no real up or down. It's all relative to the center, and this is possible thanks to gravity. Now, naturally, a spinning object tends to keep other objects from sticking to it due to centrifugal force, normally causing the objects to fly right off. But on the ball Earth, thanks to gravity of course, people, buildings, and even the very air are all stuck to the surface of the ball, and would be none the wiser had it not been for authorities such as Galileo, Newton, and NASA to tell us otherwise. Thusly, considering gravity, if objects with mass are attracted towards each other, why hasn't there ever been an object massive enough to demonstrate that water would stick to it, as is claimed the oceans, lakes, and rivers do on a ball Earth? And if the excuse is then given that the Earth's gravity would far supersede that of any other object, then how is it that the moon is said to affect water levels at sea level on Earth? Further, how is the combined mass of a helium-filled balloon repelled by the mass of the Earth? Or, what up there is attracting the balloon to itself? Or are these really just the laws of density and buoyancy, with up and down actually existing as we perceive? Obviously, dense objects sink when placed in a less dense medium, and this law of density buoyancy perfectly explained the physics of falling objects long before Isaac Newton proposed his theory of gravity. But Isaac Newton was a knight of the British Order, and I personally find it strange that he was allegedly born on Christmas Day and died on the vernal equinox. And why did his coat of arms have 2 crossed bones on a black shield? Was he indeed a Freemason or Rosicrucian? I also question Galileo and his supposed experiments dropping his balls from the Leaning Tower of Pisa. While Giordano Bruno and other contemporaries of Galileo were burned at the stake after being publicly tortured, Galileo was merely placed under supposed house arrest, while his associations with the Jesuits have long been acknowledged. So investigate the subject for yourself and ask questions. there are many experiments one can easily do to simply verify that the flat, motionless plane we live on is not round or spinning, here are some experiments which are a bit more decisive, challenging current scientific models. To begin, the Michelson-Morley experiments, in which a beam of light was split and then sent in two directions, one along the alleged rotation of the Earth and one perpendicular to it, and then onto a film, on which any interference would be recorded, measuring the difference in speed traveled by the two beams. However, no interference was detected. The Sagnac experiment also split a beam of light, but measured its interference whilst traveling opposite directions along the edges of a rotating turntable. Instead of noting an oscillating interference pattern, as expected on a rotating Earth, one beam was found to be traveling consistently longer than the other, denoting a stationary Earth. This critical discovery had to be concealed by the scientific establishment, so the Fitzgerald-Lorentz contraction was concocted, claiming with no justification that the beam of light traveling in the direction of Earth's rotation became shorter and therefore the light traveled less distance. There was no basis for such an explanation other than the desperate attempt to excuse away these critical findings. In addition to the previously mentioned experiments, Airy's failure, in which George Airy failed to have to adjust his telescope due to his presumption of a moving Earth, while relatively there's no way to tell whether the Earth or stars are actually moving. By filling a telescope with water, the starlight entering the telescope is slowed greatly, and in order to still view the starlight on a rotating ball Earth, an adjustment to the angle of the telescope would be necessary. But if the stars are rotating, no adjustment is necessary. Though George Airy expected a necessary adjustment of 30 seconds of an arc, he failed to mark even so much as a single second's adjustment, proving that the telescope, and thus the Earth, was stationary. Further exhibiting a stationary Earth is the Red Bull Stratosphere dive, in which Felix Baumgartner, after ascending over New Mexico for over 3 hours, should have landed over 3,000 kilometers west into the Pacific Ocean, but Felix landed 70 kilometers east from his takeoff point, literally flying in the face of the ball Earth allegedly rotating at over 1,000 kilometers per hour at that latitude. It also serves to point out that vertically fired cannonballs should all fall significantly west, but they always fall back down no more than 2 feet from the cannon, many times falling directly back into the muzzle. Further, on a spinning ball Earth, north and south-facing cannons would have to establish a control, while eastwardly fired cannonballs would travel significantly farther, with west-firing cannons covering the shortest distances. But regardless of direction and what some people claim, bullets and cannonballs always cover the same distances and never curve due to the so-called Coriolis effect. So investigate the subject for yourself and ask questions. How is it possible that the moon's gravity is said to cause the tides, when at sea level, the gravitational force of the Earth is said to far surpass that of the moon? While the tides do seem to follow the moon's motions overhead, upon closer inspection, one will realize that the motions of the moon overhead are regular, while the tides, not so much so around the world. Indeed, if it truly were the lunar mass attracting Earth's waters towards it, then all lakes, ponds, and other standing bodies of water would similarly experience the swelling and ebbing of the tides. Heck, even rivers and canals would exhibit some sign of being under lunar influence, yet these all remain mysteriously out of the moon's gravitational grip. And if the gravity of the moon were truly tugging on the waters of the Earth, there would be nothing to stop the water, particularly while in vapor suspension, to continue on upwards under the lunar influence and find its way onto the moon. So investigate the subject for yourself and ask questions. It is claimed, due to Earth's rotation, that water draining in sinks and toilets in the northern hemisphere spins clockwise, Whilst upside down in the southern hemisphere, it spins counterclockwise. There are also claims that snipers and ballistic calculations have to establish a control, when this is clearly not the case. Just as with Foucault's pendulum, while they blatantly claim it rotates with Earth's alleged spin, in reality spins in either direction without discrimination, neither do sinks nor toilets drain consistently as claimed by the so-called Coriolis effect, with many sinks having been found to drain both ways, simply depending on the shape of the basin and the angle of the water's entry, not from the alleged rotation of the Earth. Hurricanes and other cyclonic storms also do not follow the alleged Coriolis effect, with global wind patterns appearing to blow haphazardly around the ball. But when looking at the wind patterns on the azimuthal equidistant map projection, the weather patterns are found to consistently spin counterclockwise around the flat Earth, paralleling the rotation of the Sun, Moon, and planets against the stellar mobile above. The only ready explanation for this link between these two seemingly unrelated phenomena is in the ancient philosophical concept that the universe is manifest within an ocean of ether, and everything is interconnected. So investigate the subject for yourself and ask questions.
On a ball Earth, the full moon should never be visible in the sky at the same time as the sun, as you'd have to be looking through the Earth in order to do so. No matter how high your altitude, the horizon never descends below eye level, as you'd expect on a ball. In this shot, we can clearly see the full moon well above the horizon, despite the risen sun already climbing in the eastern sky behind the camera. And if light were actually bending around these bodies, as some claim, then shouldn't it follow that all these lights appear blurry to us, their edges undefinable as their shed light scatters and bends madly off in all directions? But the luminaries always appear clearly outlined, as they are, unless obfuscated by clouds. So then, how is this phenomenon possible on a ball Earth? The answer is that it's simply not, and the Earth is flat, with basic laws of perspective determining the angles at which we observe sun and moon. So investigate the subject for yourself and ask questions.
Whenever a light shines through a dense medium, it will appear larger to the observer due to the increased glare. This effect is further intensified when the air through which the light is shining is dense with moisture. Since the densest air is right above the Earth's surface, it goes to say that as the sun moves away from the observer, its rays would have to pass through more dense air than it would when it is directly overhead. Therefore, at sunrise and sunset, the light appears dilated with its color modified. While the laws of perspective also cause the sun and moon to appear smaller as they move away from the observer, the final result between these two opposing effects is what we see. And from many dry, high-altitude locations, it is possible to see the sun and moon appear to vanish into a point before disappearing beyond the horizon. Further evidence demonstrating that the sun is a localized spotlight moving overhead rather than the Earth orbiting around it at 93 million miles are what appear to be focused hotspots seen directly on clouds below the sun as viewed from airplanes. This is further exemplified by sighting in the tropics of the large sun phenomenon. So investigate the subject for yourself and ask questions.